Did you know that right now, as you're watching this video, your brain is releasing the same chemicals it would if you were doing cocaine? That's not an exaggeration. The endless scroll you do on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube triggers your dopamine system in frighteningly similar ways to hard drugs. And here's the scariest part. Tech companies know exactly what they're doing. I spent the last 6 months diving deep into the psychology of content addiction, interviewing former tech executives, and even deliberately getting myself addicted to social media, all to understand what's really happening to our brains. What I discovered was way darker than I expected. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you 3 mind-blowing things. The hidden psychological triggers that make content literally irresistible. Why Gen Z is experiencing the highest rates of anxiety ever recorded. And most importantly, how to break free without completely disconnecting. But first, let me tell you about Sarah. She's a 19-year-old college student who reached out to me after watching my last video. Sarah used to be a straight-A student with big dreams of becoming a doctor. Now she can barely focus on a textbook for 5 minutes without reaching for her phone. Her grades are slipping, she's sleeping less than 5 hours a night, and her anxiety is through the roof. The craziest part? She knows her phone is the problem, but she literally can't stop. Sarah isn't alone. Studies show that the average person now spends over 7 hours a day consuming digital content. That's more time than most people spend sleeping. But this isn't just about wasted time. It's rewiring our brains in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. Let's break down exactly what happens in your brain when you open TikTok or YouTube. Every time you see something interesting, a funny video, a shocking fact, or a cool dance, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine. It's the same neurotransmitter that makes you feel good when you eat chocolate, have sex, or achieve something meaningful. But here's where it gets crazy. Your brain doesn't just release dopamine when you find something good. It releases it in anticipation of finding something good. That's why you keep scrolling even when the content isn't that great. Your brain is literally gambling on the next post being amazing. The tech companies know this. They've hired teams of psychologists and neuroscientists to make their platforms as addictive as possible. They use something called variable reward scheduling, the exact same psychological trick that makes slot machines so addictive. You never know when you're going to hit the jackpot of an amazing video, so you keep pulling the lever. I interviewed Dr. Chen, a former tech executive who worked on one of the biggest social media platforms. I can't say which one because he signed an NDA. He told me something that kept me up at night. We specifically designed these apps to be addictive. The goal was never to enrich people's lives. It was to keep them scrolling for as long as possible. But it gets even darker. Remember how I mentioned doing a self-experiment? For 30 days, I deliberately maximized my content consumption. I downloaded all the major social media apps, turned on all notifications, and allowed myself unlimited scrolling time. The results were shocking. Within just 1 week, my attention span dropped from 45 minutes to less than 10. I started having trouble sleeping. My anxiety levels shot through the roof. I couldn't even watch a full movie without checking my phone. The scariest part? Even though I knew it was an experiment, I still found it incredibly hard to stop. I caught myself reaching for my phone hundreds of times a day, even when I wasn't getting notifications. The addictive patterns had been burned into my neural pathways that quickly. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what's the real harm? So we spend a lot of time on our phones. Isn't that just the modern world? This is where things get serious. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that excessive content consumption is literally changing our brain structure. The parts of our brain responsible for deep thinking, empathy, and emotional regulation are shrinking, while the areas associated with impulsivity and addiction are growing. Dr. Thompson, a neurologist I interviewed for this video, put it this way: we're seeing changes in brain structure that mirror what we see in drug addicts. The scary part is that we're seeing these changes in teenagers whose brains are still developing. Let's look at some hard numbers. Depression rates among teenagers have doubled since 2010. Anxiety disorders are up 48% in the same period, Average attention spans have dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. But here's what really blows my mind. We're the first generation in human history to face this problem. Our brains evolved over millions of years to handle face-to-face interaction and real-world challenges. Now we're bombarding them with an endless stream of dopamine triggers that they're not equipped to handle. Think about it this way. If food companies started selling something that was scientifically engineered to be as addictive as cocaine, made people anxious and depressed, and targeted children, we'd be outraged. But that's exactly what's happening with content, and most of us don't even realize it. So what can we do about it? This is where I have some good news. Through my research and experiments, I've discovered several powerful strategies that can help break the addiction without having to become a digital hermit. First, understanding the psychology is crucial. When you know you're being manipulated, it becomes easier to resist. Those notifications, they're designed to trigger your FOMO, fear of missing out. The endless scroll, it's exploiting your brain's natural curiosity and reward systems. Second, it's about creating what psychologists call pattern interrupts. Small changes that break the automatic reach for your phone. During my recovery phase, I found that simply putting my phone in another room while working increased my focus time from 10 minutes to over an hour within just 2 weeks. Third, and this is something none of the other videos on this topic talk about, you need to replace the dopamine hits from social media with natural ones. Your brain craves that stimulation, so you need to give it healthier alternatives. Real-world social interaction, physical exercise, learning new skills, creating something instead of just consuming. I worked with Sarah, the student I mentioned earlier, to implement these strategies. Within a month, her screen time was down by 70%, her grades started improving, and most importantly, her anxiety levels dropped dramatically. The future of content addiction is both scary and hopeful. On one hand, tech companies are getting better and better at hooking us. The algorithms are becoming more sophisticated, the content more personalized, and the psychological tricks more refined. But on the other hand, people are waking up to the problem. We're developing better tools and strategies to fight back. And most importantly, we're starting to understand that our relationship with content needs to change. Here's what really keeps me up at night, though: the next generation. Kids who are growing up never knowing a world without these addictive platforms. They're the real test subjects in this massive psychological experiment. That's why I'm working on a comprehensive guide to content addiction recovery, specifically designed for Gen Z. If you want to be notified when it comes out, hit that subscribe button. Remember, understanding the psychology of addiction is the first step to breaking free from it. Your brain might be wired for content addiction, but it can be rewired for focus, creativity, and real connection. Got a content addiction story of your own? Drop it in the comments below.